in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Israel braced for Iran's response following the assassination of the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. 300 days of agony for the families of the hostages who are marching today in Tel Aviv demanding a deal to free their loved ones. And Sudan's ruling general rules out attending peace talks following a failed attempt on his life. Hello and welcome. You're watching Middle East Now on I-24 News. How will Iran respond? That's the thought preoccupying many here in Israel today after the assassinations of the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and the senior Hezbollah leader Fouad Shukr in Beirut. The Islamic Republic last attacked Israel directly in April when it sent hundreds of missiles which were intercepted by Israel and its allies in the region. But as our Joe Brown now reports, that might be trickier this time around.
In the space of 6 hours on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, two high-profile assassinations were carried out which will reshape the Israel-Hamas war and the Middle East as a whole. First, the IDF strike on Beirut that killed senior Hezbollah commander Fouad Shukr, and the alleged Israeli strike in Tehran that eliminated Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh. And a common theme is being uttered by Iran and its proxies.
The commander-in-chief of the IRGC has announced that the Iranian response is definitely coming. Therefore, the Israelis will receive the appropriate response to this terrorist operation.
This is a crime committed against a guest of the Islamic Republic. Its perpetrator, the Israeli occupation, must pay the price.
And in a televised address following the assassination of Fouad Shukr, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah did not hold back on his threats towards Israel.
Today, I don't want to make speeches. I will be good with one sentence. This enemy and those who support him await our response, which will come for sure, God willing. There's no question there will be a response. The coming days, the coming nights, and the ground will prove it.
But what price will Israel pay exactly? Well, according to the New York Times, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has authorized a direct strike on Israel in retaliation for the assassination of Haniyeh, who was killed on Iranian soil. And this will not be a new experience for Israel. In April, Iran fired 300 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones at Israel in retaliation for an IDF strike on the Iranian embassy in Damascus, targeting IRGC commanders. Thanks to a concerted effort from Israel's aerial defense systems and the air forces of the US, UK, and Jordan, 99% of missiles were intercepted, and only minor damage was reported. But this time, Israel is bracing for something even bigger. According to the New York Times report, this attack will be a similar combination of drones and missiles, but will be fired from all angles. From Gaza, from Lebanon, from Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. This will attempt to overload Israel's defense systems and make it harder to intercept the missiles. And with last month's Houthi drone evading Israeli detection and killing an Israeli in Tel Aviv, Iran's proxies have shown that they are prepared and capable of reaching everywhere in Israel. Last April, it took 2 weeks following Israel's strike on the Damascus embassy for Iran to attack Israel. But due to the fact that the regime is better prepared now, the wait is expected to be considerably shorter, with some fearing it will be as early as this weekend. As a result, some airlines, such as United, Delta, and British Airways, have halted flights to Tel Aviv. As of yet, there has been no news from Israel's Home Front Command, with civilians urged to stay calm but vigilant for any changes.
I
am wrapping up a visit to Home Front Command. General, I am impressed by the important work that has been done so far. This is, of course, from our preparation for what is to come. Israel is at a very high level of readiness for any scenario, both defensively and offensively. We will exact a very heavy price for any act of aggression against us from any arena.
And if Israel learns its lessons from its successes in April and utilises help from its allies once more, then there is a greater chance that damage and fatalities will be minimised from the now imminent Iranian attack.
So we're asking once again, are we on the brink of a regional war, or do those twin assassinations go some way to restoring Israeli deterrence? Well, our Middle East correspondent Archaeological is here with us in the studio. I'm also joined by Dr. Meir Javid Danfar, Iran lecturer at Reichman University. Good to have you with us. And in Bahrain tonight, columnist and geopolitical analyst Abdullah Al-Junaid. Great to have you with us again, Abdullah. Welcome.
My pleasure, Laura.
Ariel, I'll start with you, if I may. Let's just talk through the potential lines of attack from the Islamic Republic that the Israelis are considering right now.
Yeah, look, we need to be cautious when we try to foresee the future. But if we gauge where we are in the current trajectory, we can look at previous events that Iran already set a certain equation following the attack in the Iranian consulate in Damascus. Now, this is seen as an even more, according to, in their eyes, a more flagrant violation of their sovereignty, and so we can expect to see at least what we saw in April. Why do I think that it will be more or less in the same MO, but a little bit more forceful? That's because back in April, we saw Iran launch missiles and drones. We saw pro-Iranian militia in Iraq and the Houthis in Yemen. We did not see Hezbollah take part in this. And this time around, they have skin in the game, so to speak, following the elimination of Fouad Shukr, who was laid to rest just a couple hours ago in Beirut. So that's one thing. Another thing, I just want to note that following the April attack by Iran, we learned that prior to that attack, Iran had notified its partners of its intent to strike and how it would strike. And last night we saw Iran's acting foreign minister Ali Bagheri hold a series of late night phone calls to his Saudi counterpart, to his Qatari counterpart, and this morning he also called his Egyptian and Turkish counterpart. Now, we shouldn't necessarily read too much into that, but if we're looking at what happened and...
It might be giving them advance warning of what is to come. We don't know exactly how Haniyeh was killed. We don't know officially who killed him, but we do know that Iran has been soundly humiliated. It must respond. How do you think that response will come?
It's an embarrassment. It's a huge embarrassment for Ayatollah Khamenei to have one of his most senior guests. I mean, in terms of foreign guests, in my opinion, after Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, I think Haniyeh comes 2 or 3 in terms of importance. It's very important in terms of symbolism and also Iran's influence in the region. To have somebody like him to come to Tehran as a guest and to be assassinated, it makes Iran also look bad in front of the Iranian people, the regime, and of course among its allies. You know, a lot of these regimes, they use the concept of security and providing security to the people as an important legitimacy factor. But to have to see such a dictatorship humiliated by such an attack, it also has domestic repercussions. So not just in terms of establishing deterrence abroad, it's important in terms of domestically for the Islamic Republic to respond. But I'd like to conclude for now by saying it's not going to be easy to maintain an ongoing conflict, even a low-intensity conflict with Israel, because the treasury that Mr. Pezeshkian received from the late Mr. Raisi has only $170 million in it, with an M. That's enough to pay the civil servants in Iran 2 or 3 days. So they face significant economic pressures. So they will attack, but the Iranians will not want to get involved in a tit-for-tat for an ongoing period with Israel.
OK. Abdullah, I'll come to you. First of all, what do the moderate Arab states make of this very audacious assassination in the heart of Tehran? What has been the reaction? And would the Arab countries come together to defend Israel if it chose to attack as it did last time?
First of all, I'm sorry, Laura, but I detest the description of moderate Arab states. Well, just normal states. I mean, this is one. Two,
yes.
Would we come to the rescue of Israel or defend the region's security? That's two different aspects. Now, for us to defend collectively the stability and the security of this region, Israel, first of all, need to start listening. Now, with the action that Israel has adopted for the last, let's say, 72 hours or more now, it may be a turning point, and Israel need to rethink its strategy. Could this be something that bridge certain gaps with regard to the regional perspective-wise and start building on that? Or is it going to continue fighting in Gaza with no horizon for prisoner exchange or hostage exchange and cessation of hostility, and then enabling a regional effort to come into Gaza, as UAE have announced earlier, something like a few weeks back? What we need for Israel now is to evaluate the situation based on tomorrow and not today.
But when it comes to Israeli deterrence in the region, Abdullah, do you think this has been a show of force, what we've seen over the last few days?
Laura, Israel is part of CENTCOM. The whole region is part of CENTCOM. This is one. Two, Israel is a co-signee of the Abraham Accords with so many countries. And whether the region like it or otherwise, Israel is a natural, integral part of this region. And definitely we would like very much for the de-escalation as soon as possible. But that doesn't mean that anybody going to sit idle in terms of broadening the horizon of this conflict. Yesterday, or on the day that Shukur was targeted, the U.S. naval forces have launched, targeted Hezbollah or somebody, Hashd Shabi bases in Iraq. And that is, again, a very clear message to the Iranian that we are on your border as well, and Israel is not alone. The current deployment of 2 amphibious landing craft plus what has been support ships like Early Brooks destroyer off the shore of Lebanon is also a measure that may send Iran the right message.
All right, thank you, Abdullah. So, Ariel, Abdullah, if I'm wrong here, Abdullah, correct me, but Abdullah seems to be saying Israel should allow its allies in the region to take some of the heat, to also help to keep stability in the region, and acts like such as this might destabilize the region more than bring peace.
Well, I don't know how much Israel's partners in the region are willing to really embark in an over-the-table partnership with Israel. We did see in the April 13th attack, we saw Jordan get involved, and because the Iranian missiles flew over their territory, so they had to down them. Same thing with the Saudis. But if what Abdullah's recommending is to have a regional summit to establish a regional defensive mechanism, that's great. Where do we sign? But I'm not sure Israel's partners are ready for that, and you can see that by the current status of public relations between Israel and Bahrain and the UAE. They're not at the same level as there was before. Just for example, a few weeks ago there was a meeting between Israeli, Emirati, and American officials to try and to discuss the day after in Gaza, but that was held in secret in Israel. And I think one of the reasons for that is because the Emiratis don't want to show that there's too let's say, willing to show partnership with Israel in this point in time. So obviously, I agree with Abdallah that this is the right solution. I don't know if the conditions currently on the ground enable for that.
All right, Abdallah, real quick, and then I want to get a response from Meir.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Errol, it was the UAE ambassador to the UN who announced that plan or that proposal. It wasn't something that was done, off the table or something like that. It's official at the highest level. What Israel need more? For the whole GCC leadership to come to Tel Aviv, for instance, Israel need to take a step. The first step is to address the issue of Gaza. I mean, we can't follow what Israel need all the time without Israel giving a little bit of a ground for us to maneuver diplomatically or otherwise.
All right, Meir, you're in agreement there.
Absolutely, 100% with what Mr. Al-Najjad, Dr. Al-Najjad, I'm sorry if I'm mistaken. Absolutely, 100%. All these operations, they're spectacular in terms of planning, whatever happened in Tehran, whoever did it, and the killing of the Hezbollah officer by the state of Israel, incredible. But it's all tactic, not strategy. It's like being able to pass the goal masterfully, like Messi, but not being able to score a goal. You don't win a game by being able to pass. That's tactic. You win by scoring goals strategically. We're not doing, and to find a strategic achievement for us and for our friends in the region, such as Saudi Arabia, such as Bahrain, such as Emirates, we need to find a solution for Gaza. And it's not coming. And let me tell you something. This makes the Iranians happy. I was listening to a conversation between conservative Iranian analysts who were talking about what an incredible defeat it was for Iranian security that this event happened yesterday. But they said Israelis are excellent at tactics, but they're not good at strategy. And you know what? They're right.
When you say a solution for Gaza, what do you mean?
To find first of all, to find a solution for the hostages, and then to find a replacement for Hamas in Gaza. At the end of the day, it's our Gulf partners who know the best. We are very lucky to have the United Arab Emirates, incredibly lucky to have United Arab Emirates willing to step in to help, and we should work with them. But unfortunately, all this is being sacrificed on the altar of political interest of Prime Minister Netanyahu, because he doesn't want to give points to his. He doesn't want his partners, Mr. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, to get threatened.
Okay, Ariel.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with my two esteemed colleagues here. Israel is not showing the initiative, is not showing any proactive measures to try and formulate this regional partnership, and I agree that it needs to come from Israel. The question is there enough willingness to conduct this over the table at a time like this? Yes, there was a statement at the UN, but I don't think that's enough at the moment.
Let me throw something in there then. Perhaps, Abdallah, if you'd like to respond first. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it, to think about an alternative leadership in Gaza before Hamas is defeated. We've talked about this before. But now Haniyeh is dead, Mohammed Deif is gone, Marwan Issa is gone, numerous big household names from Hamas have been eliminated. Do you think that is enough for Israel to now step down and say, OK, now it's time to negotiate, it's time to end the war in Gaza definitively?
I think during the Arab Summit and Bahrain, it was made very clear. The Palestinian Authority need to do a lot of work internally before they will be invited to play a major role in Gaza the day after. Two, what we need is to cross over the hurdle. I don't think Hamas going to continue carrying out military operation in Gaza when they see the PA, Jordan, UAE, Egypt, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and other friendly forces in that region. When we start doing something on the ground, I don't think Hamas going to jeopardize everything. Even Qatar doesn't stand with Hamas the way it was standing before, whether it's by hook or a crook. The whole equation has changed. Now, it's not the matter of Israel need to think regionally. The minute Israel start to change the way it thinks, it's going to reach out to let's say, the turning point in formulating something that's going to be benefiting Israel and the region at the same time.
Okay, Abdallah, we appreciate it. I'm going to let you go. Abdallah Al-Junaid, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Abdallah. Well, Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei presided today over a funeral for the late Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. His body has now been flown to Qatar, where he lived for many years. Arjo Brown has more.
Kol Kalev Bij Yamu, an Israeli phrase meaning every dog has its day, which has become a slogan to describe how everyone involved in the October 7th attacks will meet their maker. A day after his assassination in Tehran, thousands poured into the streets of the Iranian capital for the funeral procession of Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh. Prayers were led by Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, with speeches from Iranian politicians and senior Hamas figures.
Ismail Haniyeh's slogan, "We will not recognize Israel," will remain an immortal slogan. Our actions and slogans will persist. We will pursue Israel until it is uprooted from the land of Palestine.
The anti-Israel sentiment was predictably prevalent among mourners on the streets of Tehran.
Iranians are known for their hospitality. The Israelis killed our guest on our soil. God willing, we'll soon take revenge from infidels and arrogance for killing martyrs of resistance. Israel is now like a cat that has fallen into a pool. It's clawing at everything. Israel has no way to survive and knows that its end is near. The only choice left is blind assassinations. It's digging its own grave.
Israel has remained quiet on whether it carried out the strike that killed Haniyeh and his bodyguard, but the bloodlust for the Jewish state remains strong in Iran. Haniyeh's body will be transported to Doha for burial, departing an Iran that is reeling from the death of an ally on its own soil and thirsty for a quick revenge.
All right, well, to talk more about the increasingly global nature of the war between Israel and Iran and its proxies, we're joined by Zineb Ribour, Research Fellow and Programme Manager of the Hudson Institute Centre for Peace and Security in the Middle East. Welcome to the programme, Zineb. Great to have you with us. Tell me, first of all, how could this current escalation be something of an opportunity, perhaps, to build on the existing anti-Iranian alliance that exists in this region?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I would say that, first of all, I don't think that there is really an anti-Iran alliance right now, mainly because the Abraham Accords and the normalization agreements, they have enabled Israel to have diplomatic relationships with its neighbors, who also have, it is in their interest to tackle Iran, as they see it as a major threat. But yet it has not been consolidated. Their efforts have not been consolidated, mainly because the U.S. administration, the Biden administration, promoted the idea of regional integration, where U.S. partners need to accommodate Iran. And this is where I believe Netanyahu, in his speech to Congress, pointed out that there are actually all the elements right now to form a real alliance. First of all, so that Americans sort of delegate to their Middle East partners the security of the region. Secondly, because Iranian proxies are a threat not just to the freedom of navigation of the Red Sea, but also they are increasingly expanding in Africa, in the Sahel. They are beyond the Middle East. And And finally, I think Netanyahu pointed out very justly that Iran is expanding the same way that Russia, the Soviet Union, was expanding, and that it is something to consider. And this is where I do think an anti-Iran alliance makes complete sense. It is a very pragmatic proposal.
Well, as that partnership languishes somewhat, we are just a few months away, of course, from an election in the United States, a very close-run election, if we believe the polls. What are the choices facing the region when it comes to policy on Iran over the next 4 years?
Well, I do think that with Democrats, we will likely see a continuation of the Obama-Biden doctrine, which is what we see now: more Iran integration, more accommodation of its proxies, especially as we've seen with the Israel-Lebanon maritime deal, and we will see a sort of continuation. However, with the Republicans, I think with Trump, especially in his maximum pressure campaign, we will see a more I'd say a hawkish position on Iran, as it will be more seen as this disruptive element in the Middle East, but also in Eastern Europe, as it has developed greater ties with Russia.
All right, Zineb Ribor, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And Dr. Meir Javadanfar is with me in the studio. We've had very little response from the White House following the dramatic events over the last few days. There is a sense, perhaps, that Israel is going it alone?
Well, that's not how the Iranians see it. The Iranians believe that it would have been impossible for Israel to undertake such an operation if Israel was behind it in Tehran. They believe that the fact that Netanyahu received, I don't know how many ovations, they keep repeating it, is because of the ovations that he received. He felt emboldened to undertake the steps that have been attributed to Israel in Tehran. And I think this is very, and also on the same night that the reported attack happened in Tehran, there was an attack by the Americans against Hashd al-Sha'bi, Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq. So the Iranians connect these two together, and they are saying that they hold the Americans responsible. Now, the next question is, will they attack America alongside Israel? I think one of the advantages, one of the reasons they would want to do that is that so the progressives in the United States say, look, Israel is dragging us into war. We should stop supporting Israel in order to help those in America who don't want the United States to be allies with Israel. But on the other hand, if they do so...
There are also voices on the right saying that.
On the right, of course.
A strong isolationist wing of the Republican
Yeah,
Party.
but the isolationist wing in the Republican are more pro-Israel for different reasons than... they want aid to Ukraine to end, not to Israel. But if they attack the Americans, I think there's going to be a strong response. I have no doubt that President Biden backs us. I have no doubt about that.
Dr. Meir Javadanfar, thank you very much indeed. Ariel, you're staying with us. We're taking a short break. Up next, 300 days of pure agony. The families of the 115 hostages still being held in Gaza are marching today to demand a deal now. Stay with us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back. Now it is 300 days since Hamas terrorists invaded southern Israel, murdering, raping, burning and hostage-taking. That's 300 days of pure agony for the families of the people still being held in Gaza, 300 days of suffering for Palestinian civilians, and 300 days of selfless sacrifice by the thousands of IDF troops. Our Bianca Zanini examines this difficult landmark.
Day 300 of the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza began with the funeral of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Iran. In Israel, protesters blocked morning traffic, demanding a ceasefire and a hostage deal now. It's been 300 days since Hamas crossed the border into Israel on October 7th and launched the deadliest massacre on Jews in the country's history. Some 1,200 people were killed and 250 taken hostage, and today 115 people are still being held captive in Gaza. A ceasefire deal in November 2023 saw the return of 116 hostages, the release of 150 Palestinian prisoners, and less than a week of calm, which quickly fell apart. Israeli rocket attacks in Gaza made headlines around the world, and the government has repeatedly been criticized internationally for not doing enough to protect civilian lives, for targeting Hamas members in supposed safe zones, and for deliberately blocking humanitarian aid to the Strip, something Israel denies. Since the war began, nearly 40,000 Palestinians have been killed, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, with international organizations warning of famine and diseases spreading. According to Israel, some 15,000 of those killed were Hamas combatants. The terror group is widely known for using civilian Palestinians as human shields, hiding in densely populated areas in homes, schools, and hospitals. According to the UN, over 80% of Gaza has been placed under evacuation orders. Meanwhile, in Israel, constant rocket attacks from Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants means 60,000 people have been displaced from their homes in the north of the country, with no idea of when they might be able to return. The war in Gaza has divided the world opinion, with massive pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel protests spreading through universities and streets in the US and Europe, and Western governments criticizing the civilian losses in the war, but standing by Israel's right to defend itself. Countries like Russia and China supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, and their main backer, Iran. While the world focused on Gaza, Israel has been fighting to protect itself on multiple fronts. Against Hamas in Gaza, against near-daily rocket barrages from Hezbollah in the north, against the Houthis, who managed to kill a civilian in Tel Aviv with an explosive-laden drone, and of course against Iran, which in April launched over 300 missiles and drones against Israel in the first direct attack against the country. Thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets in weekly demonstrations, demanding to reach a ceasefire deal that would ensure the return of the hostages, with desperation growing for every passing day. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been criticized for dragging out the war for his own political interests. In the past weeks, it seemed Hamas and Israel were on the brink of an agreement. But then Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh was killed while on a state visit to Iran, an assassination widely attributed to Israel. Tensions in the region are higher than they've been in months, with increasing risk of a large-scale war. On day 300 of the war, it seems there is no end in sight to the conflict.
Well, in a moment, we'll cross to Hostages Square in Tel Aviv to hear what the families think of the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh and how it affects the prospects of their loved ones being released. But first, our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran, is here with us in the studio. Ariel, there are more details coming out about how Haniyeh was assassinated. We don't know the details. We might never know all of the details, but there are some kind of tidbits coming out right now, aren't there?
Yeah, indeed. If at first we thought that this was carried out by a missile attack, so according to the New York Times, citing 7 sources, Iranian, Western, and also American sources, indicating that this was not only done by an explosive device and not a missile, but I think the kicker here is that this explosive device was planted at least 2 months prior to the activation by remote that killed Ismail Haniyeh on a Thursday morning at 2 a.m. And this report by the New York Times really tries to outline also how it happened, but also the timeline afterwards. And so this is a site that was in which Haniyeh was killed, was a safe house used by the IRGC to host prominent officials, whether they're security or political officials, with close ties to Iran and the IRGC. So that also highlights the embarrassment that we talked about earlier of the severe security breach on Iran. So at 2 a.m. local time yesterday, this explosive device was activated again it was activated remotely, killing Haniyeh instantly. He, and as well as his security guard that was in the room, Khalil al-Haya, Gaza, Hamas leader in Gaza's deputy. He was the one who found the body, and then they decided to notify Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to wake him up, basically to inform him that this is what happened. And already by 7 a.m., the IRGC had issued an official statement regarding the death of Haniyeh. This highlights how big of an embarrassment and a security breach this is. And if we're also looking at additional reporting from Axios, citing 2 sources saying that this was carried out by the Mossad.
All right, Ariel, for now, thank you very much. Well, let's go down to Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. Our Emily Francis is there. And Emily, I understand the families of the hostages are marching tonight.
Yes, they are, and let's just say chaotic is the word of the evening. The march has just got underway, and if my cameraman gets a good shot, well, it's hard to see now, actually, the families are literally connected to chains on their feet. They're going to be taking an hour walk around this whole area, ending up in Hostage Square. Obviously, 300 days is way, way, way too long. We're here with Daniel Sheck, who is usually with us in the studio, and now he's out here joining the group. Obviously, you have been kind of the diplomat of the whole group, which is what you are naturally. So explain how everybody is feeling right now on 300 Day.
Look, the last few days, I think the entire country has been on edge for understandable reasons. So just imagine that every bit of news that has even remotely something to do with the fate of their loved ones resonates in the ears of these people 10 times louder than in yours or mine.
Right.
Add to this terrifying number, 300. And you can imagine it's a very, very emotional day.
Yeah. And we just spoke a little earlier to Sharon Calderon, for example, the sister-in-law of Ofer. And I mean, she was just saying even for her, it was very hard to come here today. All the families were engaged in the beginning, but it's becoming more and more difficult.
Yes, of course, because, in some of these families, in some of the members of these families, this plight has brought out unbelievable courage and fortitude. And Sharon Calderon is one of those, but you can't keep it up 300 days, every day, all day. It's just not possible. So there are moments where, and there are people, talking about the Calderon family. Hadas Calderon, she was a hostage. Can she heal now that she's back, months after she's back, when her husband is still there? It's impossible. So, yeah, there'll be a lot of emotion here today, and they'll finish the march, and then there's a big rally in the square. a huge number of artists from really the top Israeli scene have volunteered to come and show their solidarity. So it's going to be a long and painful evening.
And one last question. How are the families overall? Oh, sorry. Okay, we don't have any more time for questions, but we'll check in with all of you later. Thank you very much, Daniel. And we'll just take a closing shot here. Svika, if you could go around, you could see how slowly they're going because they're literally walking with their connected to each other with chains on their feet. Back to you in the studio.
Emily, thank you. Daniel Sheck, thank you to you as well. Well, Ismail Haniyeh is not the only Hamas official who has been sent to the end of his days. Today, 3 weeks on, the IDF confirmed that Mohammed Deif, the commander of Hamas's military wing, was killed in an airstrike in the south of Gaza last month. He was one of the architects of the October 7th massacre. More in this report.
Now it's official. Hamas's top military commander and one of the masterminds behind the October 7th attacks, Mohammed Deif, is dead. The IDF and Shin Bet announced on Thursday that the July 13th airstrike on the head of Hamas's military wing in his southern Gaza hideout was successful, based on latest intelligence assessments. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that the death confirmation of Deif, who he dubbed as Gaza's bin Laden, was a big step towards eradicating Hamas.
After we eliminated Hezbollah's chief of staff Sayed Mohsen on Tuesday, today came the final confirmation of the assassination of Hamas chief of staff Mohammed Deif. Deif was responsible for the horrible October 7th massacre and for many other murderous attacks against Israeli citizens. He was Israel's most wanted man for years. His elimination establishes a simple principle: whoever hurts us, we will hurt them.
Deif was targeted along with Rafe Salameh, commander of the Khan Yunis brigade, who was also killed in the airstrike, along with additional Hamas terrorists, the IDF said. He is the most senior Hamas official to be killed in Gaza since the start of the war. His deputy, Marwan Issa, was killed in an airstrike in March.
Mohammed Deif was afraid to die, so he hid in a way that even hindered his ability to command. He hid and sacrificed with him his people and civilians who were in the area, who were in danger, very few of whom were harmed. We found him. We will also find those next in line.
The death confirmation came during the funeral ceremony of Hamas's political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, who was eliminated on Wednesday in Tehran. But Hamas officials denied the news, saying Deif is alive and well, and following Israel's claims regarding his assassination.
There is no point in talking about ceasefire negotiations amid bloodshed and assassinations. Netanyahu and US President Biden had agreed on a preliminary agreement, but they added new conditions during negotiations. This shows that Netanyahu and his government are not seeking a ceasefire and do not want to stop the aggression.
While Haniyeh was the political face of Hamas, Deif was seen as the mythical leader of the terror group. An elusive and secretive figure, Deif rose through the ranks of Hamas since the early 90s, and over the years personally oversaw numerous terror attacks and suicide bombings on Israeli civilians.
إلا بوقف العدوان ورفع الحصار ولن نقبل بأي حلول وسط على حساب وكرامة.
Deif topped Israel's most wanted list for 3 decades, surviving at least 7 assassination attempts, giving him a mythical standing in the Palestinian national ethos of resistance. And so, with Deif out of the picture, Hamas's military and political leadership is thinning down, and the loss of their most significant symbol is a blow from which it will be hard for them to recover.
Sudan's military leader says he will not attend peace talks in Switzerland next week after he survived an assassination attempt. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan was targeted in a drone attack at a military base in Sudan but escaped unharmed. The war between the Sudanese forces and the RSF militia has claimed tens of thousands of lives in Sudan and displaced some 10 million. We can take a listen to the general speaking now.
As long as those people are staying, our battle will carry on and our war will go on. We tell you that you have came at a time when Sudan is exposed to a conspiracy, a very big conspiracy, and we with you are capable of ending this conspiracy. We will destroy this enemy. We'll destroy them tonight, tomorrow, after tomorrow. We will do it and end them.
Well, with me now, Ambassador Michael Salin is the former Swedish Special Envoy for Sudan, and he's now at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. First of all, no one's claimed responsibility for this attempt on General Burhan's life. What do you think happened?
I think that someone who has command of drones must have done it, and since only the army and the RFF are said to be the ones that have access to drones. In this case, it should clearly be RSF, even though they claim to be innocent, so to speak now. So, but I guess that the world will consider them to be responsible in this case.
Do you think that this attempt on his life has destroyed the already very small chance of peace in Sudan, or at least the chances of a ceasefire?
Well, so it looks today, but you never know. There is so much at stake. I mean, for me, it's amazing that a country that has suffered for so long, decades and decades of civil war, and now again finds itself in the world's worst humanitarian crisis. They say, although there is a huge competition, as we know, from Gaza and Ukraine and elsewhere. So it's such a huge tragedy, and the world has largely ignored it, at least in the sense of having major powers, the UN, etc., really committing itself, as was done before in the case of Sudan. And now somehow it gets ignored in the big competition between other crises in the world. So this particular incident clearly indicates much less probability of any time soon happening any meaningful peace talks. I don't see any sign pointing to that direction, tragically enough, right now.
Right. I mean, it is the region's forgotten conflict to a certain extent, isn't it? Even when we're talking about these absolutely eye-watering figures, 10 million people at the risk of potential starvation, many people displaced. And as you yourself well know, this was the site of one of the world's most famous genocides, the Darfur genocides. I mean, what is the future for Sudan? What is the solution here?
I wish I had a quick answer to that. I guess that most leaders of the world would say, I simply don't know, because they're not the means. Of course, you can always trust that in the end there will be a war fatigue that somehow will facilitate some kind of solution. But there must be a ceasefire first. But even as in Gaza, even if there is a ceasefire agreed, then it's a universe, tons and tons of problems that need to be dealt with afterwards, on the day after. So unfortunately, this is a big blow for the continued existence of Sudan as an independent country. And also, I mean, there is always a risk, and I think that risk is very real, that there will be involvement by neighboring states and their backers on the global scene. For example, I've read, but that was some time ago now, but that the Wagner group from Russia would have something to do with arming RSF, and at least that has been the claim from the official army side. But there are other players that may have supplied drones now to, in this case, I think RSF. And that will, of course, be countered by counterattacks. And when there is still this action-reaction process, then compromise doesn't exist, and therefore peace talks are so difficult. But at some stage, I don't doubt that Sudan will remain as a country. I don't see division of Sudan, again dividing Sudan, because you did have the division of Sudan once. I don't see division as being a solution. I don't see demographic preconditions for that. But there must be stability. There must be end of violence, and that means a long-term perspective for Sudan. Unfortunately, no quick fixes.
Absolutely. Ambassador Salin, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
The United States has reached a plea deal with alleged 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. The deal means he and 2 other defendants who are accused of plotting the 2001 terrorist attacks will be spared the death penalty. More in this report.
The 9/11 attacks are an open wound in American society, and this week they scored another headline. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, considered to be the mastermind behind the attacks, along with Walid Mohammed Saleh Mubarak bin Attash and Mustafa Ahmed Adam al-Hawsawi, who assisted them, have pleaded guilty to all the accusations presented by the Office of Military Commissions in a trial that was dragged for over 15 years. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, also known as KSM, was a high-ranking al-Qaeda terrorist with years of experience prior to the Twin Tower attacks. He was the mastermind behind Operation Bojinka, which aimed to explode airplanes mid-air en route from Asia to the US. The plan was uncovered in 1995 after a test killed a Japanese national aboard a Philippine Airlines flight. Defeated, he wandered around the Arab world to gain more connections, settling in Afghanistan to become leader of al-Qaeda's media committee. His experience with airplane terror attacks was appreciated by al-Qaeda's leader, Osama bin Laden, who put KSM in charge of the 9/11 attacks planning. After the attacks, in 2002, KSM kidnapped and decapitated the Jewish-American journalist Daniel Pearl. A year later, he was detained by Pakistani intelligence services and deported to the US, moving between military prisons until he ended up in Guantanamo Bay. In 2008, his trial started, conducted by a military court, but human rights organizations claimed that he should receive a fair trial through the civil court system by pleading guilty to almost 3,000 counts of murder. Among other crimes, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his associates have been spared the death penalty. In exchange, they will be sentenced to life in prison, a deal that has outraged many of the families of the 9/11 victims.
Well, I am very disappointed that a plea deal was given today to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed down in Guantanamo Bay, especially on the cusp of this information coming out today that named a couple of the guys that are down in Gitmo as being part of this support network for the hijackers. So I'm extremely disappointed that they chose today of all days, that we're also here in our courtroom, trying to hold the kingdom accountable, and they pull this stunt on us. So I'm just deeply disappointed that they chose today. I'm deeply disappointed that they chose to do a plea deal at all.
The deal also featuring in the presidential election campaign.
Just today, I heard that the Biden-Harris Department of Justice cut a deal with al-Qaeda terrorist Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to avoid the death penalty. It was reported today. Now, as someone who enlisted in the Marines to serve after 9/11, that is ridiculous, but it's not surprising. Now, just think about the point that we've gotten to. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have weaponized the Department of Justice to go after their political opponents, but they're cutting a sweetheart deal with 9/11 terrorists. We need a president who kills terrorists, not negotiates with them.
The plea deals are expected to be presented in the next week, but closure to the 9/11 attacks seems far from over.
And finally, archaeologists have solved a 150-year-old mystery about the size and borders of biblical Jerusalem. They've found a massive moat that was used to protect the ancient Jewish kings. Our Bianca Zanini reports.
The ancient city of Jerusalem has pulled believers from the world's largest religions. It has fascinated historians, archaeologists, and curious tourists. And it has been a flashpoint for wealth and conflict for centuries. The city holds the answers to mysteries of the past, and this month, archaeologists answered a century-and-a-half-old question, discovering a massive moat used to fortify and protect the kings of biblical-era Jerusalem.
For more than 150 years, archaeologists are seeking a northern fortification line of Jerusalem, something that will explain the size of Jerusalem during ancient time.
And it's at the excavation of the Givati parking lot in the City of David National Park where researchers believe they found the answer in the form of a massive fortification moat, more than 30 meters or 100 feet wide, 9 meters or 30 feet deep, and at least 70 meters or 230 feet long. The project is conducted by the Israel Antiquities Authority and Tel Aviv University, and to understand more, the archaeologists went back to a previous smaller excavation. They realized that there is a trench that begins at the excavation site and ends some 70 meters away.
Looking at the cliff behind me, we can realize that the cutting of the trench was done by a ruling elite that able to bring in all the efforts and the energy in order to cut such a deep and long and wide defending trench to Jerusalem. We do not know when the trench was cut, but we do know that it was in use during the 9th century BCE, 2,900 years ago, the time of the first Judean kings.
The trench divided the older part of the city, the area south of the excavation, with this stepstone structure, and the area now known as the Temple Mount, where the temple and some palaces stood.
If it was cut earlier than the 9th century BCE, the Bronze Age, something like 4,000 years ago, then it means that we are standing at the northern border of the city, where the city defended itself from attacks that may have come from the north.
According to the archaeologists, the size and scale of the trench completely changes the natural topography of Jerusalem, and they say it's time to go back to the biblical texts and reevaluate references to the old geography of the city.
Another incredible find here in Israel. Well, do stay with us on I24 News. We'll bring you up to date with all the very latest developments. Kalev Ben David is here next. From me and the team, though, thanks for watching. Good night.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
So I can get the soda.
Anyone you want.
Thank you.
Here.
Just forget it.
And kick it out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Meeting you.
As Iran and its regional proxies vow revenge, Israel braces for an airstrike that could come at any moment. We'll have the latest on the preparations for the coming attack. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh gets a big funeral in Tehran, and Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr a showy send-off in Beirut. We'll have the details on the last rites for two arch-terrorists. And Israel finally confirms that it did succeed in killing Hamas military commander in Gaza, Mohammed Deif, after decades of trying to take out the elusive terrorist. We'll have the details. This is the rundown on I-24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. Israel is bracing for attack. And in a few minutes, IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari will address the nation. We'll bring you that live. The Iranian regime hosted a meeting today with representatives of its regional proxies, Lebanon's Hezbollah, Yemen's Houthis, and Iraq's Shia militias, to discuss a coordinated strike on Israel in response to the targeted killings of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr. Israel is hoping any such attack, which could come as soon as this evening, is repelled as effectively as it was when Iran launched dozens of drones and ballistic missiles at it last April. But given what Iran learned from that incident, this round will be trickier to defend against. More on that in this report from Joe Brown.
In the space of 6 hours on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, two high-profile assassinations were carried out, which will reshape the Israel-Hamas war and the Middle East as a whole. First, the IDF strike on Beirut that killed senior Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr, and the alleged Israeli strike in Tehran that eliminated Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh. And a common theme is being uttered by Iran and its proxies.
The commander-in-chief of the IRGC has announced that the Iranian response is definitely coming. Therefore, the Israelis will receive the appropriate response to this terrorist operation.
This is a crime committed against a guest of the Islamic Republic. Its perpetrator, the Israeli occupation, must pay the price.
And in a televised address following the assassination of Fuad Shukr, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah did not hold back on his threats towards Israel.
Today, I don't want to make speeches. I will be good with one sentence. This enemy and those who support him await our response, which will come for sure, God willing. There's no question there will be a response. The coming days, the coming nights, and the ground will prove it.
But what price will Israel pay exactly? Well, according to the New York Times, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has authorized a direct strike on Israel in retaliation for the assassination of Haniyeh, who was killed on Iranian soil. And this will not be a new experience for Israel. In April, Iran fired 300 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones at Israel in retaliation for an IDF strike on the Iranian embassy in Damascus, targeting IRGC commanders. Thanks to a concerted effort from Israel's aerial defense systems and the air forces of the US, UK, and Jordan, 99% of missiles were intercepted, and only minor damage was reported. But this time, Israel is bracing for something even bigger. According to the New York Times report, this attack will be a similar combination of drones and missiles, but will be fired from all angles. From Gaza, from Lebanon, from Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. This will attempt to overload Israel's defense systems and make it harder to intercept the missiles. And with last month's Houthi drone evading Israeli detection and killing an Israeli in Tel Aviv, Iran's proxies have shown that they are prepared and capable of reaching everywhere in Israel. Last April, it took 2 weeks following Israel's strike on the Damascus embassy for Iran to attack Israel. But due to the fact that the regime is better prepared now, the wait is expected to be considerably shorter, with some fearing it will be as early as this weekend. As a result, some airlines, such as United, Delta, and British Airways, have halted flights to Tel Aviv. As of yet, there has been no news from Israel's Homefront Command, with civilians urged to stay calm but vigilant for any changes.
I am wrapping up a visit to Homefront Command. General, I am impressed by the important work that has been done so far. This is, of course, from our preparation for what is to come. Israel is at a very high level of readiness for any scenario, both defensively and offensively. We will exact a very heavy price for any act of aggression against us from any arena.
And if Israel learns its lessons from its successes in April and utilises help from its allies once more, then there is a greater chance that damage and fatalities will be minimised from the now imminent Iranian attack.
And the part of the country probably most vulnerable to air attacks would be that northern Israel, which of course has already experienced waves of rocket attacks since October 7th from Hezbollah. Let's go to our correspondent Zach Anders in northern Israel. And Zach, getting rockets is nothing new for northern Israel, but this time it may well be a much stronger response and attack from Hezbollah. And the question is, especially is the north ready for that, even not the areas that have not yet been hit by a rocket attack?
Yeah, you know, Caleb, it's eerie because since Tuesday, since that strike in Beirut, this border's gone silent. We're here in Shlomi, and we're looking out over the blue line. We've got Lebanon on the right, Israel on the left, and staring out over this border where you know that over 1,000 different rockets, missiles, drones have been fired for the last 10 months, and then this sudden abrupt stop. It's been nearly daily attacks, but since Beirut, it's gone silent. Hezbollah not claiming any attacks. I have heard outgoing artillery, and we're following some reports in Lebanon of a airstrike that appears to have hit a village in southern Lebanon. Still working to confirm some of the details there, but largely, at least on Hezbollah's part, this has gone quiet, and it's this anticipation that's really getting under people's skin. And I've noticed that there are discernibly less people up here than we normally encounter when we drive up to the north. You still see outside of the evacuation zone that normal pace of life, still just as many people. But within this zone here, close to the border, hardly anybody left. And what we are looking at here, as Nasrallah once again spoke virtually to address the men that were attending the funeral for Fouad Shakur in that southern neighborhood of Haniyeh in Beirut, that virtual address was fiery. He says that this war is opening up on all fronts, but those are comments that he has made already through his other addresses. What stood out, one of our Arabic-speaking colleagues noted that he says tomorrow morning there will be an attack, a very specific timeline that he laid out. It's a question that nobody really has an answer to right now, knowing that they have the capability to launch and to attack much deeper. We were yesterday in a mass casualty training event near Haifa. A lot of discussions that was taking place there was, what does this look like? Okay, we've encountered emergency scenarios in largely evacuated areas, but if you've got a major metropolitan like Haifa under fire, obviously, you know, familiar with 2006, and now there's the air defense systems in play. But still, if Haifa, with as many people that are still there, comes under threat, that looks like a much larger problem. And you hear from the first responders that there's a lot of fear right now of what they could be up against if a city of that size comes under threat like this.
All right. Could be a long night for the North, but unfortunately for all of the country, because, of course, Hezbollah and certainly the other proxies, Iran itself, have missiles that could reach anywhere. We've seen that in the past, over the past few months. Zach Anders there in northern Israel. Thank you for that. And with us in studio, we have Reserves IDF Brigadier General Israel Relic Shafir. He's the former commander of the Tel Nof Air Force Base and a former combat pilot, and our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osran. And Relic, let me ask you, we know we have a pretty good idea what's coming. Maybe not the exact strategy that's going to be involved. Give us a sense how you think an attack may unfold, and is Israel ready for it?
If it's going to be the same format that we saw in April, then probably the same coalition will handle it. This is it comprises of ballistic missiles that take about 8 minutes to get here, cruise missiles that take about an hour plus, and drones that take about 10 hours from Iran. But they could fire also these, some of these, at least not the ballistic missiles from northern Iraq.
Right.
And certainly we saw the Houthis do that the same. The time that it takes the ability to detect those missiles, drones, and cruise missiles ahead of time, the ability to go out eastward, southward, and intercept those incoming targets has been shown to be quite successful. So some will get in, but most will be shot outside if this is their plan. They could overload the system by firing a greater number.
Right.
But at least I think if with the format that we saw then, we could at least shoot double that amount without being overloaded.
All right. Ariel, let's look at some of those threats that have been made today by these various Iranian, of course, and their proxy leaders, and try to get a sense of maybe when we could anticipate this attack.
Well, if we're listening to the most recent of these threats, it comes actually not from Iran's supreme leader, but Iran's newly inaugurated president, Masoud Pezeshkian, saying that there will be Israel will soon receive its response to its cowardly terror attack. And if we're looking broadly at what's going on today, we saw top Iranian officials meeting with representatives from the various proxies, specifically Lebanon, the Houthis, and pro-Iranian militias in Iraq. That meeting is over, and that meeting was aimed at discussing what the response will be. And I agree with Relik that it's impossible to foresee the future, but we can only gauge where we're heading based on previous experience. And the equation that was established by Iran is if Israel attacks us on our sovereign territory, then we will respond in like. And the attack on the consulate in Damascus, I think, is less of a direct infringement of Iranian sovereignty in their eyes as the elimination of the leader of Hamas in Tehran,
obviously,
in a secure site belonging to the IRGC, a safe house of the IRGC, where they hosted a leader of a partner country in their eyes. And so this obviously is something we need to take into consideration. And another thing is that as robust as the previous strike was, it didn't include Hezbollah. It was Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. And now Hezbollah has skin in the game, so to speak, with the intent to retaliate over the elimination of its commander-in-chief. And so that, I think if we need to try and gauge where we're heading to at least what we saw back in April, if not more.
Okay, Relik, you wanted to describe.
I also wanted to add a word of caution to all of us, that we try to liken the forthcoming possible attack to something that happened before. But there are many more venues that they could choose. Infiltration from Hezbollah.
Right, from the north, cross-border attack on the
from
ground.
A weak point in the border, not something great that can be detected ahead of time, but something, a small point, also from the sea.
Right.
Either some unmanned ship coming in to a port with explosives, or a missile that is shot off a ship. All these scenarios should be, and I guess they are, looked at, scanned, and preparing an answer for this. And so we shouldn't be surprised if it's going to be different from what we saw in April.
Right, I would expect in some degree we'll see different tactics. Now, if I may paraphrase Shakespeare, nothing became Fuad Shukr and Ismail Haniyeh in their lives than their leaving of it. Both arch-terrorists were given showy send-offs today. Shukr's funeral in Beirut was attended by thousands of Hezbollah fighters and included a video address, as we heard, from Hassan Nasrallah saying that Israel has, quote, crossed the red line and should expect rage and revenge. And in Tehran, Iran hosted an even bigger and more elaborate funereal procession for Hamas leader Haniyeh, killed in that alleged Israeli strike on Wednesday morning. Joe Brown has the details.
Kol Kalev Bijiamu, an Israeli phrase meaning every dog has its day, which has become a slogan to describe how everyone involved in the October 7th attacks will meet their maker. A day after his assassination in Tehran, thousands poured into the streets of the Iranian capital for the funeral procession of Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh. Prayers were led by Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, with speeches from Iranian politicians and senior Hamas figures.
Ismail Haniyeh's slogan, "We will not recognize Israel," will remain an immortal slogan. Our actions and slogans will persist. We will pursue Israel until it is uprooted from the land of Palestine.
The anti-Israel sentiment was predictably prevalent among mourners on the streets of Tehran.
Iranians are known for their hospitality. The Israelis killed our guest on our soil. God willing, we'll soon take revenge from infidels and arrogance for killing martyrs of resistance. Israel is now like a cat that has fallen into a pool. It's clawing at everything. Israel has no way to survive and knows that its end is near. The only choice left is blind assassinations. It's digging its own grave.
Israel has remained quiet on whether it carried out the strike that killed Haniyeh and his bodyguard, but the bloodlust for the Jewish state remains strong in Iran. Haniyeh's body will be transported to Doha for burial, departing an Iran that is reeling from the death of an ally on its own soil and thirsty for a quick revenge.
Now, the international community continues to urge restraint in the region over fears of an all-out war erupting between Israel and Iran and its proxies. A Security Council meeting at the UN yesterday also saw some sharp exchanges between the Deputy Israeli Ambassador to the UN, Jonathan Miller, and the Palestinian observer, Feda Abdel Hadi. Here is a bit of that.
This operation sends a clear message. We will defend ourselves and respond with great force against those who harm us. The State of Israel will not stand idly by. We will continue to defend ourselves and our citizens. The world must support Israel at this time and demand Hezbollah's compliance with the Security Council resolutions 1701 by ceasing its attacks, withdrawing to the north of the Litani River, and disarming.
Mr. President, it has been nearly 300 days since Israel launched its genocidal war on the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, a war that has gravely breached all tenets of international humanitarian and human rights law, a war that has flagrantly violated the UN Charter, including the cardinal principle regarding the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, a war that threatens international peace and security.
And let's go now to UN headquarters in New York and our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. And Mike, we hear voices urging restraint and calm, but it looks like certainly we're headed to some kind of escalation in the coming days, if not hours.
Yeah, the Security Council really does not have the power, the political will to impose any kind of restraint here on the region. It can call for it all at once. By the way, that quote we heard from Jonathan Miller, the Deputy Ambassador for Israel to the UN, talking about sending a clear message. He was referring to the assassination in Beirut, not to the assassination in Tehran, which Israel has not yet claimed responsibility for. He called out the quote-unquote rank hypocrisy of the Security Council for rushing to meet at Iran's request while being silent in the face of the attack on the Golan Heights, which took the lives of 12 children. He said that the Security Council should be cheering on the elimination of arch-terrorists and not call on both sides to show restraint. We also heard from the Lebanese chargé d'affaires to the UN yesterday saying that the victims, the true victims of those attacks in Beirut and Tehran were, quote-unquote, your ceasefire resolutions and not the eliminations of those terrorists. He said Israel's objective is to drag their allies into a large-scale operation. The U.S. Deputy Ambassador to the UN, Robert Wood, distanced himself and the United States from those attacks by Israel, or at least attributed to Israel. Nevertheless, he said that it is good news, essentially, that terrorists in the region are being eliminated. However, he said a broader war is, quote-unquote, neither inevitable nor imminent. He said diplomacy can still rule the day if the political will is there. Obviously, right now, Kalev, it is not.
It is not, and we're just going to have to see what kind of role they might be, UN may be playing, or at least certainly the US may be playing if things heat up in the coming days. Mike Wagenheim in UN headquarters. Thank you for that. Relic.
I'd like to remind ourselves of a Kissinger tactic or ordeal in the 1970s, both in our war against the Egyptians, where he made sure that with the sentence, let them bleed, that both sides are equally tired of fighting. Same goes to saying about the Vietnamese War. When he wanted to get the North Vietnamese to the table, the U.S. went on a very strong attack in order to get things ready, cook for the table, that round table, mind you, that took place. So this is a type of thing that we're seeing now. Both sides are tired. They're afraid of what's coming up, and they're punching on the way to the table to try to settle this in their favor, each side pulling the rug to his own.
Well, let's hope that that's where it's headed. Of course, things can sometimes have unintended consequences, so let us hope. Now, okay, we have the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari. Let's take a listen.
We dealt with different threats that came from afar. The resilience and patience that you, Israelis, have displayed over the past few months, this is what makes it possible for IDF forces to continue and focus on the operational goals in the different fronts. We have proven over the recent period that the State of Israel knows how to deal with threats on its defensive and also have a very strong offensive in response. Today as well, various terrorist organizations boasted in the region, but we have proven throughout the war our determination and resilience. We are holding an ongoing situation estimate as we assess the various scenarios and the home front responses to them. At this point, there is no change in the defensive policy of the home front command. We are on top of things. We're constantly looking into what's happening. In any case, in case of an immediate alert, you must operate according to the instructions of the home front command. We have very good defense systems. In addition, we have international partners who have added to their forces in the region in order to help us deal with the threats. And yet, no defense is ever 100% foolproof. So therefore, you must stay vigilant and continue to comply with the instructions of the Home Front Command as you've done throughout the war. We are taking every possible measures in order to ensure your safety. In case of any changes, we will immediately inform you on all platforms and channels, both the IDF and the Home Front Command, in order to allow for proper preparation. And I will be here to keep you posted immediately. The IDF is on high alert, both on the defense and on the offense. IDF forces are deployed and ready on the ground, in the air, and in the sea, and are prepared for any scenario, and especially for any offensive plans that will happen in the near term. Today is the 300th day of the war. It's been a long war in multiple arenas and theaters, and the IDF soldiers and commanders are operating 24/7 in all sectors and in all efforts in order to achieve the goals of the war and to improve the security reality. One of the goals of the war is the dismantling of Hamas and eliminating the top leadership of Hamas. Following intel information that we received today, we can confirm that in a precise attack conducted by the IDF in the Shin Bet 3 weeks ago, Mohammed Deif, the senior commander of the military branch of Hamas, has been eliminated. He was the planner and architect of October 7th. He planned and led the attack into Israel, and he bears responsibility for the deaths of thousands of Israeli and other citizens. His hands have blood on them. Tonight as well, we continue to focus on 115 hostages who are still held by Hamas in Gaza. And I would like to address the families of the hostages from this platform on this evening. It's been 300 days that are actually an endless day since October 7th of difficulty and uncertainty that no one can fathom. Our top mission is to bring back your loved ones, and this is what guides us in every point of decision-making. The IDF, the Mossad, the Shin Bet, the entire security apparatus is constantly exerting every effort in order to bring back the hostages as soon as possible. Any questions, please? IDF spokesperson, can you confirm that that what we've published, that Haniyeh was killed by an explosive charge and not by a drone? And why did it take so long to ascertain Deif's death? And what do you think will be the response of the Shiite axis to these recent eliminations? We attacked in Lebanon on Tuesday night, and we killed and eliminated Fuad Shukr in a very precise attack. Let me emphasize, there wasn't any additional airstrike, not by a missile or an Israeli drone throughout the Middle East that night, and I won't say anything in addition to that. Let me add another thing. Iran has been waging in recent years a terror infrastructure for passing on explosive charges, Iranian explosive charges into Israel for the purposes of terror attacks. We are going to continue to operate with determination against Iranian terrorism. As for your question regarding the intel that allowed us to determine the death of Mohammed Deif, we received this intel this morning. I don't want to elaborate on its details. We kept receiving information throughout the 3 weeks, but the most significant detail, of course, was that we knew that Rafa Salameh was killed, and we knew that Mohammed Deif stood next to him, but that wasn't enough, because several times over the years it's been said that Mohammed Deif had been killed, but then we learned that it was a mistake. We need to be 100% precise and accurate when we set a fact. Today, we received an absolute proof to the fact that he was killed, Mohammed Deif, and this is why we informed this, and this is how we've always done things, always when things are confirmed. Liran Hujainov from Kan 11 this evening, Ro'i Sharon, our correspondent, reported on preparation for an attack on a missile attack on military bases in the center of Israel. What is your comment on that? Look, since October 8th, when Hezbollah decided to open fire into Israel, and most of the suffering has been carried by the people of the north of Israel who have had to leave their homes and haven't returned for over 9.5 months now. Hezbollah is attacking us. It's happening every day, and we respond and retaliate with force and determination, and we will continue to do so. The elimination of Fuad Shukr, who is responsible for the massacre of the children in Majd al-Shams, and also responsible for the killing of many Israelis and foreign nationals over the years, is part of everything we do in this war. What will Hezbollah do? What will they choose to do? That's up to Hezbollah, and I'm not going to relate and relay our intel here. We are very well prepared both on the defensive and on the offensive, and we will know how to protect and defend the state of Israel. Eran Weinstein from Sogin, good evening. Brigadier General Hagari, why is Nasrallah lying about the fact that he's not responsible for the fire and missiles on Majd al-Shams? He always boasts, Nasrallah, that he always tells the truth, but this time he's blatantly lying. The rocket that hit Majd al-Shams is from an Iranian model, Falek 1. All of its pieces are in our hands, and we have full forensic proof, and we can transfer it to any community in the world wishing to confirm that. Beyond that, we have the identification on radar of the missile launch from Shuba, and we even know who is the commander of that missile launch. It's very clear, the proof. Nasrallah is lying because he is afraid of the blood of these children on his hands. He's afraid of the Druze in Lebanon, and he's afraid of the Arab world. Nasrallah is taking Lebanon and the entire Middle East into an extensive escalation, and it will all be under his personal responsibility. Another question, can you inform us what about the conscription of the Haredi ultra-Orthodox Jews to the IDF? How many will be conscripted to battalion units? As we've committed, we will abide by the law.
Well, we just heard the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, speaking there. Main points, no change in the home front commands of now, and he made allusion to Israel's regional partners, of course, the United States, and of course, other countries that took part in the defense of Israel during that April attack there. Relic, the fact that no change in home front commands, does that mean Israelis could likely at least sleep easy for one more night?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
The fact that the home front did not issue any warning is a tactical move to show that we're complacent, in a sense. We don't want to help the Iranians and Hezbollah put us under pressure. Everybody in Israel knows that when they hear a siren, this is a good time to get into the shelter. I guess most people have water in their shelter.
They should.
And some people even have generators waiting online. But I would say that I don't expect civilian areas, a civilian population to be attacked per se.
Right.
And neither electricity or water infrastructure, because that would immediately, the reaction would be destruction of likewise on the shooter's side.
Right.
Which is pretty easy to do.
Right.
And would not only escalate, but create a lot of damage.
Right.
We won't go into detail at this time, but the Iranians and Hezbollah know that they're very vulnerable as far as infrastructure is concerned.
Right.
So I guess if at all, this is something that would be kept for a full-fledged war.
Right.
So at this time, military bases and such are probably possible targets. And if you live around that area, make sure you have enough water.
Right, but very easy for a missile to go astray, as we saw in Majd al-Shams, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Ariel, also a reference made there, and maybe we should give the viewers a background on it. It was actually a New York Times report saying that Ismail Haniyeh was not killed in an airstrike, but a bomb that was placed in that IRGC safe house where he was staying even months ago.
Explosive report by the New York Times, excuse me for the pun. But indeed, first of all, up until this report, the common belief was that this was a missile attack, whether from outside Iranian territory or other reports said that it was from the adjacent building. But this really pinpoints the MO of this assassination, this elimination, to an explosive device that was planted, as you mentioned, in the room where Haniyeh stayed in the safe house 2 months in advance, which really raises the question, first of all, the quality of room service there, of the housekeeping. But at the end of the day, this shows the meticulous planning that was put into such an attack, that they anticipated Haniyeh, or, you know, there's also Ziad Nakhala, the Secretary General of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, slept in the room nearby. Right. He may have been the target, but at the end of the day, this shows a significant breach of Iranian internal security in Tehran, in an IRGC secure site. Just to add the cherry on top for Israel's enemies, the latest reporting coming out is that the Mossad was indeed involved in this.
Okay, again, Israel has not claimed credit, but whoever carried it out certainly carried out a pretty stunningly effective operation. Briefly, Relic.
Anybody who's ever been to a Turkish bazaar knows that the price of sale and buy are often 4 or 5 times the amount that you will pay at the end. So I would take all the talk that goes on, including this particular report,
yes,
and including everything was said by Nasrallah or the Iranians or ourselves, to be part of a game of PR and threats that go around, and not all of them have to be true or not misleading.
All right, a point well taken. Now, as we've noted and as was noted, today does mark 300 days since the war between Israel and Hamas began, and it is a pivotal moment now in the conflict. Thousands of rockets have been fired, hundreds of people taken hostage, and tens of thousands of lives lost, disrupted, and changed forever. Our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini looks back at a devastating conflict that threatens to go on, and especially now also spill over into a larger regional war.
Day 300 of the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza began with the funeral of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Iran. In Israel, protesters blocked morning traffic, demanding a ceasefire and a hostage deal now. It's been 300 days since Hamas crossed the border into Israel on October 7th and launched the deadliest massacre on Jews in the country's history. Some 1,200 people were killed and 250 taken hostage, and today 115 people are still being held captive in Gaza. A ceasefire deal in November 2023 saw the return of 116 hostages, the release of 150 Palestinian prisoners, and less than a week of calm, which quickly fell apart. Israeli rocket attacks in Gaza made headlines around the world, and the government has repeatedly been criticized internationally for not doing enough to protect civilian lives, for targeting Hamas members in supposed safe zones, and for deliberately blocking humanitarian aid to the Strip, something Israel denies. Since the war began, nearly 40,000 Palestinians have been killed, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, with international organizations warning of famine and diseases spreading. According to Israel, some 15,000 of those killed were Hamas combatants. The terror group is widely known for using civilian Palestinians as human shields, hiding in densely populated areas in homes, schools, and hospitals. According to the UN, over 80% of Gaza has been placed under evacuation orders. Meanwhile, in Israel, constant rocket attacks from Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants means 60,000 people have been displaced from their homes in the north of the country, with no idea of when they might be able to return. The war in Gaza has divided the world opinion, with massive pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel protests spreading through universities and streets in the US and Europe, and Western governments criticizing the civilian losses in the war, but standing by Israel's right to defend itself. Countries like Russia and China supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, and their main backer, Iran. While the world focused on Gaza, Israel has been fighting to protect itself on multiple fronts. Against Hamas in Gaza, against near-daily rocket barrages from Hezbollah in the north, against the Houthis, who managed to kill a civilian in Tel Aviv with an explosive-laden drone, and of course against Iran, which in April launched over 300 missiles and drones against Israel in the first direct attack against the country. Thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets in weekly demonstrations, demanding to reach a ceasefire deal that would ensure the return of the hostages, with desperation growing for every passing day. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been criticized for dragging out the war for his own political interests. In the past weeks, it seemed Hamas and Israel were on the brink of an agreement. But then Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh was killed while on a state visit to Iran, an assassination widely attributed to Israel. Tensions in the region are higher than they've been in months, with increasing risk of a large-scale war. On day 300 of the war, it seems there is no end in sight to the conflict.
And on it goes. Here's what U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, speaking during a visit to Mongolia, had to say about the prospects of a hostage deal in the current situation.
Requires them to find reasons to come to an agreement, not to look for reasons to delay or say no to the agreement. And it's urgent that all parties make the right choices in the days ahead, because those choices are the difference between staying on this path of violence, of insecurity, of suffering, or moving to something very different and much better for all parties concerned. Now, again, I can't predict the effect, the impact of any one event on what comes next. I've learned over many years not to do that. But I think it remains manifestly the case that ceasefire is in the interests of everyone. It's in the interest of Israelis. It's in the interest of Palestinians. It's in the interests of the region.
Now, to mark the 300 days of the war and of the captivity of the hostages, the Hostage Families Forum and other supporters had a march this evening there around IDF headquarters, and a concert planned for this evening there in the adjacent Hostage Square. Let's go to our Emily Francis, who is out there. And Emily, give us a sense of what's happening out there.
Hi, Kalev. Definitely a lot of noise this evening. Right now, I'm in front of the IDF headquarters known as the Kiryat, where you can see, obviously, a lot of people here, asking and chanting and asking for an agreement. They were also counting to 300 about 3 different times. So to give you like an idea of what the march has been like, we were in the midst of all of it when it began. We have visuals of that where the families were dressed for the most part in white shirts saying 300, and they literally chained themselves to each other. So they were walking with their feet chained. So it's been a very, very long walk around a very big block. We're trying to wait for them to come here. They still have not come by here, but again, it's going to end in Hostage Square, where we will be a little later, where there's going to be a big concert by some of Israel's most prized musicians. A little bit earlier, we did speak to Sharon Calderon, the sister-in-law of hostage Ofer Calderon, and this is what she had to say about what they're going through.
This is the day of the 300 days. This is way too much. This is the day that we're going to march with our legs in the chain to ask the people of Israel to join us with this to this march, and to ask the government of Israel to seal the deal and finish it, because this is way too much. This is 300 days. If we are tired, the families are very, very tired. And if we are tired, so we don't know what's going on with the hostages down there in the tunnels. So we have to finish it as soon as possible.
Today you're united, like you tell each other. Do you feel the support from the government? There were the targeted eliminations in Lebanon, in Iran. What do you think of all of this?
If everyone will do their job, they're already supposed to be here, and they're not. So probably someone is not doing his job. So we are here to remind everyone that the only thing that have to deal right now is to seal the deal.
You know, Emily, you hear I think to some degree the despair and the just exhaustion in Sharon Calderon, who's been tireless in her efforts. Prime Minister Netanyahu did put out a photo a short time ago of him conferring with some of the officials who were involved in the hostage issue. But unfortunately, given that what's happening now and the targeted killing of Haniyeh and what may happen, it doesn't really, the mood there, it's got to be tough for those people out there. Doesn't look like we're on the brink, certainly, of some kind of breakthrough at the moment.
100%, you're right. I mean, it's really they're caught between a rock and a hard place. Obviously, you know, many of them, the consensus is that these targeted assassinations is only going to delay the deal that much more, or lead to more violence and torture of the hostages. So definitely painful emotionally, but while also knowing this is a war, and this is something that the IDF has been trying to target these Hamas terrorists specifically for quite some time. But again, more on what Sharon was saying to me personally, not on camera. Even Ofer's children who have been returned, I asked how they were doing, and she said mentally they're still in Gaza, that they're really having a hard time that Ofer has not come home, and moving on and healing is proving very, very, very difficult for them.
Right, the father of their children, the Calderon family.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking to see that, and one really just hopes and prays that these people get some kind of break soon. Emily Francis, thank you for that. And that is a question, Relic. The war is being fought, it's going, it may even be escalating. And the hostage issue, even though, as I said before, Prime Minister Netanyahu deliberately put out a photo to say, I'm working on it. Unfortunately, we can't be too optimistic in the short term, I would say, right now.
I think we've learned through the months that we've been dealing with this, the ups and downs, that when you're negotiating, business deal, any kind of a deal,
right?
What you see is not what you get.
Right.
Both sides are playing with their cards close to their chest. Even when you get the closer you get to a breaking point, the tougher face you present.
Right.
And that works for both sides. A lot of information that we don't have, the military and the government have. That is not to say that there is no great difference between what Netanyahu is trying to do and what the military advisors are putting through. I think people are growing apathetic and getting tired, and this is a repeat thing, and this is something for us, for introspection, that these people are in there for 300 days, and the more they stay, the harder their situation is, and the more we should be resolute in promoting their release.
All right, and that is something we cannot forget. That issue has to stay on the agenda, very much so. It should not be, never mind another 300 days, it shouldn't be another 10 days that these people, or 1 day that they have to stay there. Hopefully they'll be back soon. And staying focused on Gaza, we mentioned him earlier. He didn't get a grand funeral or any kind of funeral yet at all. But after more than 3 weeks, as we heard, the IDF confirmed today that Mohammed Deif, the commander of Hamas's military wing, was killed in an Israeli airstrike in southern Gaza Strip last month. He was one of the architects of the October 7th onslaught, and Deif topped Israel's most wanted list for decades, giving him, I would say, an almost mythical status among Palestinians. And as our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran explains, his loss will also be a painful one for Hamas.
Now it's official. Hamas's top military commander and one of the masterminds behind the October 7th attacks, Mohammed Deif, is dead. The IDF and Shin Bet announced on Thursday that the July 13th airstrike on the head of Hamas's military wing in his southern Gaza hideout was successful, based on latest intelligence assessments. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that the death confirmation of Deif, who he dubbed as Gaza's bin Laden, was a big step towards eradicating Hamas.
After we eliminated Hezbollah's chief of staff Sayed Mohsen on Tuesday, today came the final confirmation of the assassination of Hamas chief of staff Mohammed Deif. Deif was responsible for the horrible October 7th massacre and for many other murderous attacks against Israeli citizens. He was Israel's most wanted man for years. His elimination establishes a simple principle: whoever hurts us, we will hurt them.
Deif was targeted along with Rafe Salameh, commander of the Khan Yunis brigade, who was also killed in the airstrike, along with additional Hamas terrorists, the IDF said. He is the most senior Hamas official to be killed in Gaza since the start of the war. His deputy, Marwan Issa, was killed in an airstrike in March.
Mohammed Deif was afraid to die, so he hid in a way that even hindered his ability to command. He hid and sacrificed with him his people and civilians who were in the area, who were in danger, very few of whom were harmed. We found him. We will also find those next in line.
The death confirmation came during the funeral ceremony of Hamas's political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, who was eliminated on Wednesday in Tehran. But Hamas officials denied the news, saying Deif is alive and well, and following Israel's claims regarding his assassination.
There is no point in talking about ceasefire negotiations amid bloodshed and assassinations. Netanyahu and US President Biden had agreed on a preliminary agreement, but they added new conditions during negotiations. This shows that Netanyahu and his government are not seeking a ceasefire and do not want to stop the aggression.
While Haniyeh was the political face of Hamas, Deif was seen as the mythical leader of the terror group. An elusive and secretive figure, Deif rose through the ranks of Hamas since the early 90s, and over the years personally oversaw numerous terror attacks and suicide bombings on Israeli civilians.
لن ينعم الكيان الغاصب بدم ما لم يأمن شعبنا ويعيش بحرية وكرامة ولن يكون وقتا لإطلاق النار إلا بوقت العدوان ورفع الحصار ولن نقبل بأي حلول وسط على حساب وكرامة.
Deif topped Israel's most wanted list for 3 decades, surviving at least 7 assassination attempts, giving him a mythical standing in the Palestinian national ethos of resistance. And so, with Deif out of the picture, Hamas's military and political leadership is thinning down, and the loss of their most significant symbol is a blow from which it will be hard for them to recover.
Ariel, certainly a huge symbolic loss for Hamas. On a practical level, how much does it impair them?
Hamas lost their number 1 and 2 in the political and military leadership since the start of the war. But I think the loss of Deif is even more significant than the loss of Haniyeh. If there's two names that are chanted by Palestinians who are incited for terror, it's Mohammed Deif and Al-Aqsa. I'm not sure what they're going to be chanting now, whose name, if any. And that's, I think, the main takeaway from Mohammed Deif's elimination.
Relic, I want to ask you about this airstrike, the footage that was released today, really striking that bomb, devastating, but the surrounding area seems to have been not so damaged.
Well, when you drop a bomb, let's say a 1-ton bomb, the pilot, or you can actually prepare it ahead of time, the fusing, where do you want this bomb to explode? You can have it exploded above the ground. With a proximity fuse, you can have it exploded if it touches the ground, and if it goes in a certain time, which is in meters, let's say 20, 30 meters. If you want to refrain from too much collateral damage, you will have it exploded at a certain depth, such as what we saw, and that means that not a lot of shrapnel will go sideways, not a lot of air pressure that kills will go sideways.
All right, Relic Shafir, Ariel Osseron, thank you for joining us. Now, Haniyeh, the northernmost town on Israel's coast, right by the Lebanon border, has become under rocket fire since October 7th, but it's likely to intensify if there is an attack from Hezbollah in the coming days. Our Pierre Clochhandler went up there, heard what the residents said, and filed this report.
על כל הדם שנשפך על הילדים שלנו, על כל החיילים שלנו, זה לא היה לחינם ולעולם לא יהיה לחינם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ייקום את דמם, והיום הוא עשה את זה בגדול. תודה רבה לחיילים שלנו שהגיעו עד לשם ונתנו בראש של מי שהיה צריך לתת.
על מי את מדברת?
על הנייה. ברוך השם, לא מחכים לך 72 בתולות כמו שחלמת. השאירו ממך פירורים.
There's some confusion between the identities of the dead. את הכרת את פואד שקר? את שמעת עליו בכלל?
לא שמעתי עליו, ואני לא רוצה לשמוע עליו.
Nahariya is outside the range of Hamas's rockets, but not of Hezbollah's. But on the main boulevard of this coastal city in northern Israel, right by the Lebanon border, everyone rejoices and waits for what's to come, but not necessarily for the reaction of the closest enemy to Nahariya.
תשמע, זה היה בוקר מאוד מאוד מרגש. פתחתי את הטלפון, הייתי בשוק. קודם כל הייתי בשוק. זה שמחה שהיא קצת מעולה בפחד, כי אמנם חיסלנו בן אדם בין הבכירים שיש, אבל אתה לא יודע מה יכול לקרות עוד כמה דקות ואיך נגיב, כאילו, איך יגיבו אלינו. אז
מתייחסת.
על איסמעיל הנייה, ברור, למי?
מה עם פואד שקר?
גם הוא. האמת שאם מדובר על חיזבאללה, אז אני חושבת שהחיסול שלו הרבה יותר משמעותי להשלכות שיהיו פה.
All in all, the summer sun is smiling on the faces of the town's shopkeepers.
הלילה, שמחה גדולה, הלילה. למרות העצב, למרות כל העצב והקושי, ואנחנו בהחלט חוטפים פה בומים ואזעקות, ויש לי 2 בנים בצבא. אבל אסקפיזם זה שם המשחק, בריחות קטנות, הסחות דעת. תבואו לנהריה, לא לפחד. יש פה הרבה טוב, הרבה יופי. באמת שיתמכו בנו. נכון. באמת אנחנו צריכים את התמיכה של כל עם ישראל. אנחנו פה באמת במצב קטסטרופלי כבר מבחינת הכלכלה. באמת עסקים פה סוגרים כמעט יום-יום.
אני מנגן פה כי אני צריך פרנסה, כי אין פרנסה אחרת כרגע. כן.
אתה עושה בדרך כלל?
אני מתעסק בתכנות, אינטרנט ודברים כאלה, בניית אתרים, אבל כרגע זה מה שאני מתעסק. לא פינו אותנו, אזעקות, ממ"ד, ובכל זאת יש לי 3 בנות. משפחה, ואני יודע שאני גם לא אוכל לעשות את זה, אם עכשיו יתחיל להיות מתח, אז אני אהיה תקוע בבית. מצד שני, זה שיושב לך כזה מפלצת מוסלמית ששונאת אותך ורוצה להשמיד אותך, זה גם בעיה. צריך לחשוב איך פותרים את הבלגן הזה, אבל בהחלט חושש.
I love Nahariya, but there's almost no living soul on the beach. No tourists, a couple of fishermen.
מחכים.
מחכים למה?
מחכים לנסראללה. למי מחכים? מחכים שיקרה משהו, אני יודע.
אתה חושש?
לא. לא. אנחנו עם הנצח, לא יכולים לשבור אותנו.
And let's end this broadcast on some good news. Congratulations to Israeli judokas Peter Palchik, who won a bronze medal at the Paris Olympics today, and Inbal Lanier, who gained a silver medal. Mazel tov. Also, a warm welcome home for Wall Street journalist Evan Gershkovich, free today in a big Russian prisoner swap that also saw the U.S. Marine Paul Whelan released. Finally, to our Israeli viewers, please stay safe tonight and stay close to your shelters. And definitely observe all of the Home Front Command instructions in the coming hours and days. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News. Stay safe.